are ready to call our planning board meeting to order. So it looks like we don't have no minutes to review, because this is carryover from our last meeting. But we will have our roll call with Anna. If you could do the roll call for us.
Sarah Glanville,
Here.
Carrie Miller,
Here.
Pam Burgess,
Here.
Jane Walker Payne,
Here.
Russ Walker,
Here.
Donald Dale,
Here.
Robert Kuhn has recused himself due to a conflict of interest, Peggy Levi,
Here.
Sherry Richmond,
Here.
and Council Representative Rebecca Rayborn. Here. Quorum is present.
Thank you. All right. Matthew, you're going to give us a meeting overview?
Good evening.
Good evening.
To all the members of the planning board, the audience, and those watching at home. Oftentimes, as members of the public, we only attend these types of meetings when there are items of interest that may affect us personally. That's completely understandable. I know personally what it's like to sit in the audience during a public meeting, and I want to be certain that we in Jamestown do the very best job possible to explain to those who don't often come to the meetings, or perhaps this is your first meeting, what to expect. That's because even though I'm personally very familiar with how the planning and rezoning processes work, when I've had the time to sit in public meetings, I've had similar feelings to those in the audience might likely have this evening. And I feel it's incumbent upon us as a staff and as a public body to try to raise the bar and go the extra mile to explain how the process works. Tonight, the board will hear a rezoning request. Requests for rezonings come to the staff from applicants. Sometimes that's those that have an interest in a piece of property, and sometimes it's the property owner. But we can even start it as a municipality. We can start the rezoning process. And the general process works like this. The staff review a request, they formulate a staff report, and they make a recommendation that is then presented to the planning board. The planning board holds a public hearing and then makes a recommendation to the town council based on a myriad of issues, but mostly whether or not the request conforms to the comprehensive land use plan. And finally, the town council hosts a public hearing and has a duty to make a ruling on the matter. The town council is required by state law to host a public hearing on the matter. So again, the public will have another opportunity to address the final decision-making board. And again, staff far exceeds state minimums when it comes to advertising those meetings. Quite often, you may hear from members of the community who make claims that Jamestown's not being transparent or doesn't value the input of the community. And I want to be very clear that we go far above and beyond the minimum requirements set by state law. State law does not require the planning board, your body, to actually host a public hearing or actually to entertain commentary from the public at all. But Jamestown's self-imposed local ordinances, our laws, do require a hearing at the planning board level. State law only requires that the immediately adjacent property owners be notified of a rezoning request. Jamestown's, again, self-imposed laws require notice to be mailed to those within a 500-foot radius. And in addition, oftentimes our staff go well above those limits to send out notices far beyond that, just to ensure that the public is notified. I say these things to remind everyone that our staff and the boards strive to be extremely transparent and open to public feedback. A proposal to rezone or amend the zoning ordinance raises many important and appropriate issues and concerns. What are the land use impacts of this development for the individual property owner, the neighboring owners, the broader community, and even the local government? If it's approved, what does this mean for economic development, environmental impacts, private property rights, social equity, infrastructure and opportunity, and the community's vision for its future? Each of these are legitimate concerns for legislative zoning amendments, which is the type of amendment you'll be hearing this evening. General Statute 160D 701, and that gets kind of in the weeds, sets forth the statutory proposal for authorizing land use zoning regulation. To start, zoning regulations, quote, shall be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan and shall be designed to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. State law expands on that broad notion to set forth additional public purposes for rezoning to prevent overcrowding, to provide safety from fire and other dangers, to ensure efficient and adequate public facilities and services, etc. Under the authorizing state law, zoning regulations must be made with reasonable consideration of the following, among other things. One, is the character of the district and its particular suitability for particular uses. Two, a view to conserving the value of a property owner's rights next door, value of property. And three, encouraging the most appropriate uses of land. We have before you tonight a request for what's called a conditional zoning. A conditional zoning allows for site-specific conditions to be added to the rezoning. As authorized under the general statutes, a conditional zoning district must be proposed by the property owner, and any conditions must be mutually agreed upon. So you remember at the last meeting when I did get up and talk, I was talking about the fact that the owner or the applicant that's requesting the rezoning also has to agree to the conditions that the planning board may propose. There is some flexibility for the substance of the conditions, but they are limited to conditions that address the development's conformance with applicable plans and impacts that might reasonably be expected to be generated by the development. Those conditions can include, among other things, limits on the allowable uses at the site. So where a standard rezoning must consider every permissible use that's listed under the ordinance, a conditional zoning may be conditioned to limit allowable uses. There are also items that the planning board may not consider. There are constitutional protections that prohibit the board from making decisions based on race, religion, ethnicity, and other protected classes. The board cannot discriminate against perceptions of income, familial status, or other character of the owners or residents issues, if you understand that. Apart from discrimination, governing boards, as yourself, you're an appointed board, but the governing board as the town council would have fairly broad discretion for making land use decisions. Courts typically defer to the local political decision by the local decision makers, but there needs to be some valid land use rationale for your decision. A decision without that rationale is, at a minimum, unconstitutional, is arbitrary and capricious, and could indicate that an illegitimate reason, say racial discrimination, for example, underlies the supposed reasons for the decision. Steer clear of that. In conclusion, it's wise for us to recall the duties of the planning board this evening. The board must advise the council on how the request relates to the town's comprehensive land use plan, and then make a statement related to those requests, whether it's consistent or inconsistent with the comprehensive land use plan. The planning board's recommendation is advisory, and so it is non-binding. The town council can make a different decision than the planning board, and that's happened in the past. We do appreciate the volunteers who serve on our board, and as staff, we also remain ready and willing to meet with anybody who has concerns. I know that Anna has put cards out at the back. If you have any questions about that, we'd be glad to meet with anybody who has those questions. Thank you. You have any questions for me now?
Doesn't look like it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Anna, I think you're going to come up first, yeah?
Good evening. I'm going to do a quick overview of, I'm going to pull this down. I'm going to do a quick overview of the request, some things we heard last meeting, and some overview of what has changed since then. So this is request 2022-01. It just means it's the first rezoning we've had of this year. So the location is at 4718 Harvey Road. That's parcel 223271. And the request is from agricultural to conditional zoning bypass. This is approximately 31.4 acres. The applicant request is from going from agricultural to conditional zoning bypass The reason for request is to develop a site that includes attached two-car garage, master down townhomes with the potential for a 2.5-acre commercial site. I want to do a quick overview of what is conditional zoning. Matt touched on this in his speaking, but I just want to go over what a conditional zoning is versus conventional zoning. So as mentioned before, this is a conditional zoning request. So the UNC School of Government defines conditional zoning: a legislative process in which an applicant proposes and the local government considers a map amendment that includes additional conditions. That's compared to a conventional zoning map amendment, which changes the zoning district applicable to a piece of property, but does not include any standards beyond the base standards of zoning ordinance. Conditional zoning allows the local government and the applicant to agree on additional conditions that may be appropriate for a particular project within the context of a legislative rezoning. So, an example of conventional zoning would be if this was just bypass. But this is conditional, so it's CZ bypass, conditional zoning bypass. Typically, conditional zoning conditions are more stringent than those in conventional zoning district. For example, the conditional zoning may have a more narrow list of permitted uses. For example, in this case, they've taken all the uses, just well over 50 uses, I'm sure, and taken it down to 5 or 6. These conditions must be mutually acceptable to both the property owner and the government. So the definition of bypass, which is what this zoning district is based on, conditional zoning bypass. The bypass district is established to provide opportunities for compatible and sustainable development along the future Jamestown bypass. Access to buildings in this district is provided through a secondary street network. The secondary street network is both auto-oriented and pedestrian-oriented. Development standards in the bypass district acknowledge that the automobile is the primary mode of transportation. Development and design standards encourage pedestrian-scale development along the secondary street network. Goals of the bypass district include providing a pleasant environment for motorists, a safe environment for pedestrians along secondary streets, ensuring the safety of motorists and pedestrians, and preserving the capacity of the bypass to accommodate high traffic volumes at high speeds. Uses in this district include services, employment, residential, and industrial. Allowed building lot types include urban workplace, shopfront commercial, multifamily cluster, an attached house, and civic building. So that would be if it was a conventional zoning, we'd go just by that and what's in the LDO. This is a conditional zoning, so the applicant has had a few requests. These are those conditions. No apartments allowed. Maximum number of residential lots shall be 95. The setbacks, a maximum front setback of 30 feet along internal roads and 65 feet along Harvey Road. The LDO setback for attached homes is from 10 to 25 feet from the street right-of-way, so they're asking for a farther setback from the road. Architectural standards, vinyl exterior with some element of stone or brick wainscot on the front, decorative vinyl shakes or board and batten in the front gable, shutters per plan and elevation. Some elevations are designed not to be conducive for shutters, and a variety of elevations and neutral exterior colors. The area of potential commercial use shall be limited to 2.5 acres. The remainder of the site shall be limited to residential uses only, and I will show a map of this in a second. Commercial uses shall be limited to post office, medical, dental or related office, real estate office or professional office such as insurance, legal, accounting, consulting, bank, financial institution, florist, gift shop, or hardware store. A type A buffer per LDO 11.6 would be required between commercial and residential uses. And I do want to note that buffer is particularly on this site. If they were to do a commercial use, because it would be bypass and bypass, typically a buffer would not be permitted. A buffer will still be needed between bypass and neighboring properties per the LDO. They will still have to meet all landscaping requirements. And now you'll see this one in red has been added since the last meeting. A traffic impact analysis, TIA, shall be completed before this rezoning is heard by Town Council. The developer shall comply with requirements identified in that TIA. So this is an overview of the presented plan, and I will touch more on that TIA. So it's 86 townhomes, I think it's 30 separate buildings, 86 townhomes, ground level primary bedroom, 2-car garage. That's 2.7 units per acre. If this was just a conventional bypass, 12 units per acre would be allowed. And that is, per the LDO, expressed as the number of units per gross acreage. Or the other option, and you see that gray area, is a potential commercial use, would be 80 townhomes. So those 6 that are within that gray would go away. And 2.5-acre limited commercial use. And those uses would be as laid out in the conditional uses, those post office through hardware store. The envisioned Jamestown comprehensive plan is what the planning board is to make their decisions based on, make sure does this comply with that. So in the comprehensive plan, this is identified as a preliminary growth area map. It's that as a section on there. So this is a growth area. That was identified based on current use, parcel size, access to major transportation routes, availability of utilities, nature of adjacent development, and environmental constraints. The future land use map identifies this as mixed use. The mixed use future land use classification is applied exclusively to the properties located on and adjacent to the intersection of the Jamestown Bypass and Harvey Road. The intent of mixed use classification is to facilitate the development of these key properties with a mixture of low intensity office and service uses in proximity to the bypass intersection, along with a mixture of a wide range of housing types in larger integrated developments in this prime growth area. In general, all non-residential uses should be located along the Harvey Road and bypass frontages, with development standards that maintain the small town and historic aesthetic of the community, while residential uses should represent the majority of the development and occupy the interior of these parcels. There are several guiding principles in the comprehensive plan. I'm not going to read all of these out because I read them all for you last time. But staff identified that this plan does meet number 1, 2, 4, 10, and 11 of the guiding principles in the comprehensive plan. Now, last meeting, we heard from numerous community members that voiced concerns about school traffic. Based on those concerns, you saw a condition was added to complete a TIA before the request was heard by council. It does take several weeks to complete a TIA and then several more for it to be reviewed by NCDOT and staff. I did speak with Donna Bell with the Guilford County Schools Planning Department. I said, how are these car riders going? What are they doing? How is this planned out? She told me how car riders are broken up by grades, so there's different times and locations to be picked up within the school area. And the bus riders...
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't think that's totally accurate because my child goes there. There are different locations for grades. There are not different times.
Okay. She said different times, but...
That is not true.
Okay. Different locations. So that's what she told me. So...
And the different locations means either the back of the building or the front of the building. 6th graders are in the front, 7th and 8th graders are in the back.
Yeah. She did...
Sorry, I'm sorry. I got you off your flow. I'm sorry.
She did talk about how the first few weeks are always hectic, but they get into the groove and they learn when to come in and where to go out. Bus ridership is down. NCDOT had told us that when we spoke with them before. Donna Bell with Guilford County Planning Schools Planning Department did confirm bus riders are down, and if I would please put in a plug to encourage kids to ride the bus. It does help with school traffic issues, so I'd be happy to do that. However, Mrs. Bell had checked with the principal of Jamestown Middle School and with risk management, which does the traffic and things there. And in the past year, they had not received any traffic complaints. So I want to urge people to contact the right people. They said we want to be good neighbors, and if we have traffic concerns and issues, please reach out. So I'm going to leave this slide up so people can write down this number and email. So this is for the Guilford County Schools Planning Department. Their number is 336-574-5225. And the email for Donna Bell is belld2@gcsnc.com. Now, just because they haven't received any complaints doesn't mean that there aren't issues there. Based on our public hearing last month, we know there are. I just want to make sure that the public has the right contact to tell them so that it can be addressed in the appropriate manner by the people who can actually make those changes.
I will mention too, and I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, just because I know some about this, is even though the locations are different for the grades, they all have to funnel into the same. It's not till you get to the actual school down, so you turn off Harvey and you're down the road, it's not till you get to the actual school where it actually veers off. Now Haynes Inman, if she's talking about Haynes Inman over here, they may have a different time that they're dropping off and picking up. Maybe that's what she's talking about. But in terms of Harvey Road, it makes no difference to the traffic on Harvey Road, the different locations.
Yeah, so we definitely know there's problems, and the people to contact is the Guilford County Schools Planning Department. It's up to Guilford County Schools and NCDOT to address those issues. I understand that when the concrete median went out up near Hethwood, that took away a turn. But the reason that was taken away, after speaking with Donna Bell, who's very helpful, and I encourage you to call her, is so that eventually we don't have backing up onto the bypass, which will open in the winter. Because obviously we don't want to back bypass traffic up. So that way it encourages everyone, if you're turning left, to go in at Haynes. So I'm going to leave that number and email up for you and remind the board the decision before you, as Matthew gave you an overview. Is this zoning district the correct zoning district to apply in this situation? Is the request consistent with the comprehensive plan, and is it in the public interest? Town staff have reviewed the request and feel that the conditional zoning bypass district is appropriate and consistent with the envisioned Jamestown comprehensive plan. That's what I have for you from my presentation. The applicant is here to speak as well. If you have anything for me before that, I'd be happy to answer them, or I'll be available after as well.
Questions for Anna before we call up the applicant?
Yeah, I just have one thing. It does concern me about the time. So I know you said that we can call Donna and Bell, but I don't think if we have the same questions, we don't want to bombard her. So I think we should come up with a way of maybe assigning one person to make that phone call and maybe deliver back the information in regards to the time. I think it does matter.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good suggestion.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Has the PTA not complained to the Guilford County Schools about traffic?
Very good question. Not that I know of, I'm not a member of the, on the
Yeah,
board
just-
of the PTA, so I'm not sure there's been any formal complaint. I'm guessing, this is a total guess based on personal experience, and my son actually does ride the bus there, but I drop off at a different school for my other son, and I'm guessing, again, based on total personal experience, so take it with a grain of salt, that you just take it as a fact of life that I've got to sit in this horrible traffic, and it doesn't even occur to you to complain to someone, because you just are like, this misery is just part of it, so. But I think that's a great idea, so, yeah, we can talk more about that, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, all right, we'll call up the applicant, please.
Good evening, Chairwoman Glanville and members of the board. My name is Charlie Hall. I reside at 5603 New Garden Village Drive, Greensboro, North Carolina, 27410. With me tonight, I've got Rich Glover with Glover Engineering, Dion Brown with Davenport Engineering. They're the company that's putting together the traffic impact analysis for us, and Tom Hall, president of Windsor Homes. So Anna did a great job of giving you all a nice overview, as I appreciate that. We're basically just here to answer any questions, and I'm going to ask Dion to come up and give an overview of how the traffic impact analysis works, just to give you guys an idea. That is in the works. I know we're getting pretty close, and the DOT will still have to review it once Davenport is complete. So we will abide with anything, that the DOT tells us we have to, and I'll leave it up to you.
Good evening, my name is Deanne Brown. I work with Davenport, 4600 Marriott Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina. We have been in contact with NCDOT. This development actually does not generate enough trips to require a TIA. However, since it is close to the bypass that they are constructing, they have access to look into it as well. So the first step is to do a scoping meeting, which we did with them, and they advised us of their concerns, which is the ADT, which is annual average daily trips on the road, and how it is over 4,000. So typically that requires turn lanes on the road. So we have done that scoping with them. We are waiting for their approval. I know there are concerns that traffic was conducted while school was not in session. They advised us to use a forecasting that they use for the bypass, which was done during school, and we would use that data to interpolate to what it would be today, as well as we use the MSTA Municipal School Transportation Assistant Calculator to generate what the two schools that are currently in off of Harvey, what those trips would generate, which is what we would do for any new school that comes onto the scene or gets relocated somewhere else. We would use those same methods of using that calculator to determine how many students and how many students would ride buses versus how many students are in carpool, and determining what those queue lengths would be for internal circulation for it all to work. So those were two methods as far as getting the data, and as well as there is another pocket of houses in that area that we use ITE manual, which is again another national-wide manual that everyone uses to generate how many trips are done. So that is how we came up with our numbers for background traffic. After that, we would use those numbers to come up with the base volumes and then project those out to the future, which were 2025 is when they predicted the development would be all in place. We generated future site trips, again with the ITE manual, and then distributed amongst the 3 access points, really one main access point and then 2 driveways to a couple houses on, or townhomes on Harvey Road based on their site plan. Again, all that information is sent off to DOT. They will tell us if they agree with it. We are still waiting for that approval, and then we will be finishing out the TIA so it can be submitted and reviewed by your planning board or your planner, as well as DOT, and get approval. As mentioned earlier, their main concern is the traffic and ADT on Harvey, which in general, they're basically going to require turn lanes onto Harvey to mitigate the congestion that is currently there.
So, and I apologize
Go ahead.
if I missed this. So you do the impact study. Now, say your impact study says, oh gosh, this is not going to be wonderful. I don't know if it's going to be disastrous, but not wonderful. So then, how does that translate to the DOT eventually maybe doing something? Do you know what I mean?
They will look at what existing conditions are versus, or future no-build conditions are versus what the build conditions are. So if no build, let's say, is a level service A, and then all of a sudden jumps to a F, which is nobody on the road versus everybody on the road.
Yeah.
They will set conditions and make the developer do improvements. If that can be turn lanes, that can be
Oh, okay.
signals, that could be anything of that nature. In this case, they know that they want turn lanes because
Oh,
they
okay.
know it's going to be a congestion issue, and they want, left turns are usually the ones that hold up the traffic. So they want them to get out of the way
Yeah.
and to get onto
Yeah.
where they're going.
Okay,
Yes.
But DOT has no recourse against Guilford County Schools, correct? I mean, they can't go back and force them to do something.
I am,
'Cause to me, you're the drop in the bucket. The bucket's almost full anyhow.
right,
Correct.
yeah.
To me, the problem's the Guilford County Schools as much as anything.
yes,
But you have no recourse to go back and require them to change something or do something, correct?
I don't know what they have authority to do. I do know that there's another department within NCDOT called the MSTA, and they do look at schools. Even if they are built, they will still sometimes look at schools and see what can be done to improve it.
Okay, thank you.
Just a comment about that, you can't tell the parents not to come, you know, and I don't know, but there are so many roads that they will drive up to pick up their kids, and that's what they're doing instead of using the bus. And I would recommend that they take the bus, really, but you can't tell them. So that's something that you can't control. The Guilford County Schools can't control that either, unless they try and build it by land and have another exit somewhere.
Yes.
You know, something like that, but that's long-term looking at something too. So it's a problem, and from what I understand, there's a barrier. So, you know, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know if I'm envisioning this correctly, but if you turn out of those townhomes, how can you turn left?
At their town, the developer's townhome, that median is actually right above their access point. So only people that are getting blocked are Hearthwood Road to get out.
Okay, so they're not blocked.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer your other question about making students ride buses and things like that, true, they cannot make them ride buses, but to your point earlier, if they had to redo a study, they could suggest that they do staggering as far as pickup and drop off. That would help with alleviating the congestion.
Yeah, and it is tough there because there are two schools. I don't know the Haynes-Inman schedule, but I'm guessing it doesn't align perfectly with Jamestown Middle School. So, yeah, and I don't have a child at Haynes-Inman, but I can also imagine that the population served by Haynes-Inman, that sometimes riding the bus is a very difficult endeavor for them, so it might be easier sometimes for parents to take them. But I'm also guessing, and this is a total guess, that the population of Haynes-Inman is a smaller population than Jamestown Middle. I'm guessing that Jamestown Middle produces most of the traffic in that area. These are just statements, not questions for you. Just my musings for the evening.
I would assume that there may have been more bus riders prior to the pandemic.
I'm guessing so too, yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's any type of something statistically that we could look at in regards to numbers from possibly 2019 versus currently, to have something to maybe look at from a number-wise that would maybe help with the amount of car
Yeah.
riders.
We would hope at some
and-
point it level sets back to whatever the ridership
Absolutely.
was previously, yeah. Yeah,
So I really believe that this is affecting currently, but maybe not, from prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
Is what I really believe.
yeah. My child wasn't there pre-pandemic, so I don't know what the traffic was like then. I'm guessing it still was not wonderful, but yeah, I'm guessing it's probably worsened since the pandemic. Yeah.
Was the traffic like this before the pandemic?
No, that's what I'm saying, my child wasn't at that school.
Oh, wasn't at that
Pre-pandemic, so I personally don't have knowledge of that area and the traffic at that area pre-pandemic, but I'm guessing it still wasn't great.
Okay, I have a question. How can you figure in something about Haynes-Inman? Because that's that's a school that will have special, special traffic situations. I'm trying to phrase it the best way I can.
Yes, ma'am. So the MSTI calculator is based upon population. So from our research, the Haynes Inman School has about 140 students, plus staff and faculty. We were estimating about one bus going in and out of there. So based on that calculation, that's how they come up with how many parents drop off versus who will ride the bus.
So there would be one bus and then,
Again, this is based upon our estimation since the school was not open. These are just educated guesses.
but not a call to the school, though.
We didn't get any returns.
Okay, I just wondered.
I do want to note that the TIA has not been completed yet.
Right.
These are all preliminary things that would be completed and researched in full during the TIA process. The condition that's proposed is that the TIA would be completed prior to being heard by the town council. So the town council would have all those final numbers and results and calls to the school before hearing it. So I do want to note that this has not been completed. And so Haynes Inman, I'm sure, has more than one bus because it's a developmentally, it serves developmentally different population. So,
Yeah, so I'm guessing they have, this is again a guess, that they have smaller buses that are equipped for wheelchairs and those kinds of things. So I would guess it was more than one bus that goes through, but yeah. Other questions or? All right, we appreciate the presentation.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions before we open up the public hearing? Okay, well, before we open the public hearing, I just want to go over a little bit, kind of like Matthew described for us what the process is, because it's not always inherently known to folks. It's not always necessarily inherently known to folks how a public hearing works. So I'm just going to go over some parameters. So speakers have 3 minutes to address the board, and this is your time to give us feedback, let your opinions be known, any information you want to bring to us that you think that we do not have. We will listen to you, consider your comments, but it's not really a time for engaging in dialogue, which I know can feel very frustrating. Sometimes you want that back and forth. A good time for that is if you contact town staff during the business day. They will be happy to talk to you. As Matthew said, there are cards, business cards on the back table. We may, if the comments you have generate questions in us, we may ask town staff to come forward to address some of those questions. We may ask the applicant to come forward to address some of those questions that we've come up with based on your feedback. Yeah, and I think that's it. So I think we're ready to open the public meeting, yeah? So, or the public hearing. I guess this is a public meeting always, but public hearing. Okay, so we will open the public hearing. So if there's anyone who would like to come up and speak about this rezoning request, please do so. And just come up to the podium and state your name and address, and don't be shy, just stand up and walk up.
I just wanted to put a clock on myself. Okay, excuse me. Okay. Hi, I'm Teresa Alden. I live at 100 Hethwood. My daughter is in the back, and she goes to Haynes Inman. I'm just going to go off what I wrote. Haynes Inman is a special needs school. This school was designed for the most vulnerable children. It's a chance for parents and families to have a regular life. This girl wasn't supposed to live. She now has the chance to be there until she's age 22. This is why we moved there. And the buses, they require a lot of special care to go into with these students. And to also these children are on such a strict schedule that, I mean, it's going to really affect. Have you seen a child have a major meltdown and you think, oh, this is just bad behavior? No, this is just how they are. But this is their place, and this is going to affect the special needs community very negatively. But right now, this isn't a responsible, oh, well, let me just say, it doesn't matter what the school board or the DOT were thinking when they located the schools. This has happened a while ago, and this is the reality now. Responsible planning involves dealing with a situation as it is now. It's needed here, and simply passing it off the decision to the town council is shirking that responsibility. The proposal will affect the nearby neighborhood, it will affect the entire town, with the families of many hundreds of school children being affected. Haynes Inman wasn't even called. That's sort of a punch in the gut as a parent of a special needs child. And as for the development, for the company or the builders, they try to downplay the impact of this proposal and like at the bottleneck, and the claims are not credible because we can't expect that at least 86 3 and 4 bedroom townhomes will have only a few dozen elderly people who can't travel much. They completely neglect any mention of the commercial set aside, which they say might house a post office, bank, medical offices, and other businesses. Traffic to and from those would hardly be negligible. Moreover, right at the outset, there would be 3+ years of construction, with construction vehicles, building supplies, workers, earth-moving equipment, filling up the road, not to mention the major disruptions in laying water and sewer lines. Worst of all, when asked about these impacts at a Zoom meeting with residents, the applicant simply just said that if there were any problems later, it would just be up to the DOT to come in and remedy them, presumably with even more construction. Again, responsible planning is needed here, right now. It doesn't need to be passed to the town council yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come up and speak?
I'm her husband.
Same address,
Brian
I assume.
Stevenson, 100 Hethwood. Yeah, we're talking about the 2 schools right now, but there is a third. The high school's right there, Harvey and Vickery Chapel. Nobody's even said anything about that. It's 1,320 feet is a quarter mile. Sounds better when it's 1,320, or a quarter mile instead of 1,320 feet, right? Yeah. So, like my wife said, Haynes Inman wasn't even called. Come on. If this is a planning board, that's not planning. It's not planning at all. What are we doing? I mean, when all these schools have to get let out at once, what happens? Tornado notice? Nobody can even move. I've been in that situation. I had to go pick my daughter up. I was there well over an hour. And that's now. Now, not after we put 86 more townhomes in. And this idea of there's going to be 2 people in each one. No. And then it's also going to end up that, well, we live there, but now we're going to rent it out. There's no stipulation on renting. We're going to all have to deal with that. And when they rent, you got multiple roommates, multiple cars. It's just, we're not thinking here. We're not thinking long-term. We need to, because if they put 3 schools there now, and they didn't think long-term, what's going to happen? The people that own this property, they don't live here, they're in Texas. What do they care? They're just going to get the money. Same thing with everybody we're going to sell these homes and make money, right? Maybe it generates tax dollars, great, but what are we going to sell our souls for? You know, my daughter, she's been exceptionally well back there. to say that Haynes Inman has one bus? Come on. One bus for 140 kids? No. You got a separate bus system. They're the first student buses. They have special needs access to them for the wheelchairs. It's not like you're just opening the doors, everybody's getting in. No, you gotta open the door. A gate's gotta come down to get there. Each first student bus also has an extra rider in there just to buckle in the kids. These buses all have the 5-point harnesses in them for the kids that don't have a wheelchair. I would say over 75% at Haynes Inman are in a wheelchair. So, come on. We gotta do more planning. That's what we're supposed to do, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak on this topic at all?
Good evening. I'm Steve Almond. My address will soon be 4710 Harvey Road. The question I've got is with the neighborhood itself, I guess. Right now, it's a dead-end road. You've got 86 townhomes. If we assume 3 people per townhome, that's somewhere between 250 and 300 residents in that neighborhood. Is there a way, or is there an issue about public safety if you have to get a fire truck or an ambulance in? There's only one way in and one way out. Is there a way within that neighborhood to create a loop, still have one entrance into Harvey Road, but some type of loop so that someone, if trees fall down during a bad storm or whatever, is there another way to lay this neighborhood out so that you've got 2 means of egress within the neighborhood to get to the back side of the neighborhood?
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Well, we'll end the public comment period then, and see if there are any more questions, discussion points. I know I have had a couple of questions come up for the applicant, but let me see if others have questions or talking points first.
I'll just say that
Yeah.
the requirements for the properties that they're putting in exceed our standards, which is excellent. The only thing that I did see on the property that I think would be beneficial to the property itself would be some visitor parking spaces. And that was the only thing that I saw was not there.
Thank you, Peggy.
I tend to agree with Peggy
Yeah.
that just looking at the townhomes themselves without this other serious situation, but just looking at what was designed, and it looks pretty good. You've got you've got the wetlands here. You've got some trees and nature. I mean, I think some of it would be nice to be there in that kind of setting. But my concern, along with her, what about taking out a few townhomes, having some kind of visitor parking on one end and visitor parking on another, you know, reduce it just a little bit. That would make it better, because if you have a birthday or anniversary, any kind of occasion, you're going to have a lot of cars. And I guess that's what I was looking at. It may not be feasible financially for the applicant, but I was with Peggy when we were talking about this before. It would be nice to have some space in there for parking for visitors and maybe even emergency vehicles, who knows, at that point. So that would be my personal recommendation, that they look at that. And the other questions I have are probably for the applicant.
Okay. Maybe we could call the applicant up, because I know when we had the technical review committee, the question about emergency vehicles did come up, and that seemed to be addressed already. So Maybe if someone from the applicant wants to come up and talk a little bit about that.
I'm Rich Glover, Glover Engineering. We did talk about that at the TRC meeting, and typically the 100 units is the threshold for more than one access point.
I remember that.
And so we did look at that, and that's one of the reasons we have the 95 unit cap
Yeah.
on there. And one thing to keep in mind too with these townhomes, I know a lot of townhome developments, there'll be a single car garage with one single driveway. These are 2-car garages with enough space for at least 2 other cars in the driveway, so you're looking at 4 parking spaces per unit, which is unusual. Most townhome developments that I work on don't have such large driveways and things, and then there'll be additional parking at the mailbox units and that sort of thing as well.
And Rich, could you tell us a little bit, because I know this, we talked about this at the technical review committee, because there was concern about the size of emergency vehicles and not being able to turn around and stuff like that, but it sounds like that's already been thought through.
It has been, yes. Yeah, the streets are wide enough, as well as the turnarounds at the ends are designed for a full-size fire truck, ladder trucks to turn around, larger than what actually Jamestown used the Greensboro design, because they have a larger truck in case Jamestown gets larger, Pinecroft, Sedgefield gets larger trucks, so they could be accommodated in the future as well. Didn't want to take that into consideration.
The questions I had, which are nothing that you can necessarily do about, but I wanted to just ask, well, one maybe you can. So I know at the meeting, I was not able to attend the last meeting, but it had come up that I think where the entry-exit point for this development is going to be right, like the headlights of the cars are going to be right in someone's window, and there was some discussion about maybe moving that so it's not, so it's a little offset, so it's not really.
Yeah, we're looking to see if we can move that a little bit to the north. We'll be working hand in hand with DOT to move it as much as
Okay.
we can throughout the design process of the turn lanes
Okay,
Ms. Brown was speaking about.
okay, wonderful.
That will definitely be taken into consideration while we're looking at what we can do, working around the median, working with the turn lanes installation and that sort of thing.
Okay, and then I know, and this is the part you can't necessarily do something about, but you may know, like, one of the concerns I know that came up, I don't know if it came up at the last meeting, but it is a concern that has come up, is that some kids do walk to school, to Jamestown Middle School, and there are no sidewalks. Now, I know there would be sidewalks that the developer would put in on their side as part of the requirements there, but who do you work with? Is it part of this traffic impact study, or like, how do you work with someone to say, and maybe it's the Gilbert County Schools with the Safe Schools initiatives that, you know, to walk, that there are walkable schools. Like, how do you get to that where you say that this is an issue? And again, this is kind of off topic because I know it's not the developer's
Yeah,
responsibility.
I'm
but
not sure, I think.
You don't know? Okay, that's fine.
I don't know if
That's
staff
fine.
could help, but I mean, we're proposing sidewalks within the subdivision as well as along the frontage along Harvey Road.
Okay.
Along our property.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
doing
yeah.
everything we can on our properties.
Yeah, yeah. The state of North Carolina just has this is nothing that you all can do anything about either. The state of North Carolina has the wackiest sidewalk rules to me that I've ever seen, that you can just have sidewalks that lead to nowhere, rather than requiring that they be connected to other sidewalks and be a full streetscape of sidewalks, but that's not the developer's responsibility. I just think it's a little Looney Tunes, but
We're doing our part to it.
I appreciate it.
That's what we do.
Okay, those were my questions that I had. Do people have any more questions for the developer, or?
Sharon.
Oh, yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sharon.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But again, first of all, my compliments on the design and all that I read about it. Once you get off Harvey Road, I think looks really nice.
Thank you.
What you're going to design. And I'm going to the problem that we learned about with the traffic. And I've been to Haynes Inman as a guest several times, so I'm familiar with that school and with the counselor there, too. On page 3 of the application, that you fill out, there's a request to describe the impacts on public facilities and infrastructure, and that includes the public schools and roads. And so at the last meeting, we learned about the traffic, so that is different now than when you filled that out, not anticipating what this problem would be. The schools are there, we can't move them. I don't think you can find another exit to go around that watershed or go around there. You know, I keep dreaming of that for you, and that dream does not come true, because that would really help. Is there a way to have another exit coming across where the 6 townhomes are on front? Is there another way to angle in 2 exits?
We looked at tying in across from Haynes, or I guess Haynes Road. And we don't own the property directly across. To come into that angle, we can't construct there. And also adding more traffic at that intersection, we feel like would be a detriment.
Okay, thanks.
We don't want to add anything anymore. And every time you add an intersection on the road too, you've got to make sure you have proper distances between all the intersections and,
Okay, thanks. I didn't know that, so that's good. Then, the other question is, if you have the commercial area, if you go with the commercial, during the staff meeting there, it was said there would be approximately 800 cars a day. And if that's during, let's say, 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock, that's about 10 hours. And that would be 80 cars an hour. The concern I have would be that if you just had the townhomes, you're looking at around 500. So it would be less if you didn't have the commercial. I guess that's my personal recommendation, is to look at not having commercial. And the other reason that I would recommend that, and maybe you have another answer or another viewpoint, is that if I'm a business person and I have one of these, there's a list in here, medical or related office, real estate office, or one of these, and my customers get caught in that school traffic, coming and going, I don't know how well I would do as a business owner. You know, one time if they're coming to me as a florist and having to wait 15, 20 minutes or an hour to get in and out, and they didn't know the time of day to choose it, I'm not going to go back to that florist shop. So my long-term concern for the business person in that commercial area would be the effect of that traffic. If we're not even looking at how it affects the schools, the children, or the parents, or anybody else, what about me as a business owner in that area that's restricted with traffic a couple times a day, 9 months out of the year? Would these customers come back? Would I prosper as a businessman once I saw what was going on? I guess that's my question.
And certainly that's a concern, and that's why we tried to limit the number of uses there. So let me use an example, like a bank is one of them.
Yeah,
Banks open at
yeah,
9 o'clock,
definitely.
the school traffic is over with by that time. So you're looking at offset peak times to help alleviate that problem. And one thing to consider too is, we looked at the land use plan for the town. I mean, this is shown as a mixed-use area, very high intensity. I mean, all commercial, it could be apartments or anything, and what we're proposing here is a very, very low intensity of development. I mean, 2.7 units an acre is lower than any townhome development I've ever done. And I mean, I've probably done over 50 different subdivisions this size. And that's the lowest density I've ever seen on one. I mean, the ordinance allows for up to 12 units an acre. And due to the environmental factors and putting in these larger, nicer townhomes, the density is much lower. So it's going by the own town's recommendations and adopted land use plan, what we're putting in there is the least intensive of any of the options and lower than even on the low end of the intensities. So as far as fitting in with the zoning and the surrounding areas, we were trying to go by what had already been adopted by the town and go by that guidance.
Yeah, I was on the committee for the comp plan, so I know when we looked at that. And again, the new information with that traffic, you know, at 2 or 3 o'clock, or if they let out school for ice at 11.
Sure.
Different things like that. Even as a business owner, have you thought about, you know, the effect on that business owner? Because I did the other day, I thought, gee, you know, would I lose customers? Would they come back? Would they know to come back at a certain time, or would they pick that? Because customers are kind of picky.
Sure.
About that. So I guess my thought would be, I would feel much more comfortable if it were just the townhomes, because of, it would lessen the traffic a little bit. And I think it would probably be better to not have commercial if you have a question about people coming in and out. And maybe you have different ideas on that. It was just my thought the other day.
Mhm. Well, the one thing too is, once the TIA is developed, we'll have a lot of the facts of exactly what is it, what are the projections with and without the development, with and without the commercial, and take a look at that, because one of the things that the developer has to consider too is the marketability of this. I mean, they
That was
don't want
my-
to build something that they're not going to sell, and that goes for the
That was my
residents as well
question.
as if there's a commercial component of this.
That was my question about the commercial area too. Would it be viable?
Sure.
Because of that,
Yeah,
the
and if,
traffic
and if it's not
situation.
viable, then it's, I mean, that's a decision that they want to do. I mean, you've got to look at the market and decide that at that time. And anyone buying it there would consider all these different factors.
Another question. How do you, we have the guiding principles, and one guiding principle, number 11, is one of my special interests. I think everybody on the planning board knows where this is going to go. It's to preserve, protect and preserve mature trees and tree stands from removal in conjunction with land development activity and promote the growth of healthy forests in the communities. How does your development comply with the guiding principle number 11?
Well, one of the bad parts about this property for the developers is a good part for what you're looking for, because we have the streams, we have the wetlands, we have very large buffers along these that will be preserved completely as natural.
That was what I was hoping to hear, is that it's not going to be cleared and have, it's going to be left natural. Does it have to be, or is this your choice, or both?
It's a combination of both. I mean, we could go in there and clear it, but I mean, if we're not going to grade within those areas, we don't need to clear it. The one thing about development, I mean, when you go to clear trees and grub the stumps, it costs money. It's expensive to do. People think, hey, you can get the timber for it. Well, to take the stumps out and move it on, that costs way more than the actual, what you get for the timber. So you don't want to cut, as a developer, you don't want to cut any more trees than you have to. One, just to be a good person, but two, because it costs money. And so there's no need to clear more than was absolutely necessary to put in what they're wanting to put in.
Plus the maintenance of something that you put in.
Oh, absolutely. That's an added cost to the HOA that they're not going to want to incur.
Well, that's good to hear, that it would be minimally cut down what you need, and then that would be left.
Certainly.
So that answers that question. Am I the only one with questions here? For this property, when we did the comp plan, townhomes seem a good fit. My compliments on the design, and you've got more in areas that's required, so my compliments for that. It's just the traffic problem that concerns me, and how to mitigate that. Again, my feeling, one would be to not have the commercial, and another is, of course, you're going to comply, because you had the statement up there, you're going to comply with the suggestions or from the traffic study. If you
Certainly.
have to have a turn lane, I mean, do you do that, or does the DOT do that?
No, we would have to install that.
You'd have to do that?
Yes, to mitigate our added traffic.
I think that's it, and thank you very much for being so amenable to my questions.
Certainly.
Anyone else have questions for Rich? Okay, all right, thank you, Rich. Does anyone else have questions or comments that they want to discuss? Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, can I say something?
No, we've already closed the public comment period, ma'am.
Let her speak.
I'm sorry.
We already closed the public comment period. You had an opportunity to come up earlier for public comment, but we've closed that.
I can't hear well, so I didn't hear what was going on. So may I just ask a question?
We can't, the public comment period has already closed, ma'am.
Listen, I've lived here since 1954, and I'd like to say I've never been to a meeting like this, and I'd like to have one question.
It's against process, ma'am. We already ended the public comment period. We called several times for people to come up. I don't know if that's true or not, but All right, other questions or comments? Okay, well, something I would like to say, and I don't know if it resonates with anyone or not, but I'm going to say it. You know, whenever we're making these decisions, I really try to balance our mission, which is to evaluate whether the request meets the comprehensive development plan, and our mission to make recommendations based on that. But I think it's also very important that we not ignore the needs of the people who already live in Jamestown and who are impacted by these decisions. And so you all know this already, that one of my big things has always been when these departments, governmental agencies all work in a silo and don't talk to each other, and then issues just get compounded and compounded and compounded, and no one wants to address it or take responsibility for it. This is my personal opinion. In this situation, it seems that Anna has gone out of her way to contact the schools, to try to engage them to address this issue. The developer is doing the TIA, I can't remember what it stands for, traffic impact study, which is above and beyond what they need to do to engage the DOT, which are, it seems to me that those are the two major government entities that can address the traffic issue, is the schools and the DOT. So I personally am pleased to see that people have done that and reached out and are not just ignoring the issue at hand that is, I think, the most major concern for folks probably. It's my most major concern with this. And realizing that we as a planning board, we as a town, as the town council, as a town staff, that there's only so much we can do, but at least if we cannot do something directly to solve a problem, that we engage the appropriate people who may be able to solve it. And I feel like that's been done. That's my personal opinion. So that's just my 2 cents about the issue.
I agree.
Very well stated.
I agree.
So, but Pam, I think it's a good idea to maybe that we organize and send in our concerns as a planning board, as one, rather, like you said, rather than bombard her.
Right.
So maybe, I don't know, the best method to do that, we obviously have to adhere to open meeting laws, so we don't want to do anything over email or anything like that. So Pam, do you want to kind of take that on, and we can email you individually if we have comments we'd like you to add, or and then that way, maybe if we all get to you by Friday with any concerns or comments we have,
that's
and that you could contact her, do you mind?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So Pam, I assume we have your email somewhere, but we'll get it.
Yeah, we'll get it.
Okay. All right, those were just my thoughts on it. So, all right, so I guess, are we ready then to take a vote?
Yes.
Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to either approve the conditional zoning request? We're making a recommendation to recommend approval to the planning board. We're not actually recommending it be approved because we don't have the authority to do that. But we can we're making a motion if we agree that we recommend the town council approve it, or vice versa, that we are recommending to the town council that they reject the request. I can't make the motion.
I move that we make a recommendation to approve this proposed change to the town council.
Thank you, Carrie. Do we have a second?
Second.
Pam has seconded it. All right, so this is a roll call?
Yes.
All right.
Sherry Richmond,
Yes.
Peggy Levi,
Yes.
Jane Walker Payne,
Yes.
Carrie Miller,
Yes?
Russ Walker,
Yes.
Pam Burgess,
Yes.
Donald Dale.
Yes.
The motion passes.
All right, thank you. Now we need a motion on the consistency statement. So would you like to read the
Yeah.
consistency statement?
I make a motion that the proposed zoning amendment be approved based on the following. The proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan for the town of Jamestown. The planning board further finds that the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan because conditional zoning bypass fits the future land use category mixed use as identified in the envisioned Jamestown comprehensive plan. And the proposed zoning amendment is reasonable. The planning board considers the proposed zoning amendment to be reasonable because the report of the town staff finding the proposed zoning amendment to be reasonable is adopted by reference, and the planning board further finds that the proposed zoning amendment is reasonable because the property is located in Jamestown preliminary growth area due to its size and location along a major transportation corridor, and conditional zoning bypass allows for reasonable growth along the bypass. And number 3, the proposed zoning amendment is in the public interest. The planning board considers the proposed zoning amendment to be in the public interest because the report of the town staff finding the proposed zoning amendment to be in the public interest is adopted by reference, and the planning board further finds that the proposed zoning amendment is in the public interest because it meets multiple guiding principles as identified in the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Carrie. So that's the motion. Can we get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Peggy. All right, this is just all those in favor, right? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Okay, that motion has passed. And does that take us to the end? Is that adjournment now?
There is a public comment period, but nobody signed up.
Oh, okay, thank you, Katie. So, no one signed up for our public comment period, so I think we just need a motion to adjourn.
Could I say something?
Yeah, please.
Yes, I'd like to, I always go through this as thoroughly as I can with the talents that I have, which are limited at times. But it's been a great audience to have on both meetings, and I compliment all the people who came. There are so many meetings, and we discuss important changes and things that are going to affect Jamestown, and no one is in the audience, and no one comes up to speak or to let us know how they see things. So it's with a heavy heart that I approve this because of some of the situations that are with it. But still, I think the applicant did as well and will do as well as he can, and appreciate the staff. This has caused unusual situations for all of us to look at and to think about and to ponder, and I really appreciate all of us.
Thank you, Sherry. All right. On that note, is there a motion to adjourn? All right, Jane made the motion, Peggy seconded it. And then we say all those in favor? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. All right, we are adjourned.